Okay, I think I'll start talking now. So, um, as you all as you all know, for everyone here, uh, you've signed up for this tournament, which is this coming weekend, so the 13th and the 14th. Um, this tournament is online and will be hosted through Tabroom's NSDA campus. So it'll operate the same way that last tournament did, and um, mainly the important things to know are that uh, it is over both days and the schedule is pretty spread out. So um, know that you'll have a lot of downtime in between rounds and you'll have a lot of, you'll have to, you'll, or I mean, uh, both days will occur. So, be ready to show up on Saturday and Sunday. Um, I would say some other important things are that although I myself and many of the other officers for debate will not be attending, um, that you can reach out to us if you have questions during like prep time and stuff. Please feel free to do that. And feel free to reach out to Mr. Kistler too. I think try to familiarize yourself with the NSDA campus before the tournament if you've not used it before. I'll send out a video link to show how to operate it properly, as well as some other things just to review. Um, Really, I don't think that there's too much to say. Um, but does anyone have any questions on what I've said so far? If not, I mean, I really. Oh, also, has anyone here not done like a debate before? Has it like scrimmage, um, practice debate, etc.? Okay, Ethan. Okay, so Ethan and on May, I'm gonna plan to have a. You both are you. Your teams are both novice, so I'm gonna try and organize a practice debate between your two teams since you guys have not scrimmaged or debated ever, or sorry, debated before. Uh, and I will organize that probably for Thursday. So just plan for that in your uh, calendar. And other than that, not too much to uh, discuss. I'll send this recording out to the group chat, and um, oh, also, is everyone in the group chat? For it's called the Rob Clark Turn 2021. If anyone's not in it, please send your phone number to one of the officers so we can add you. And okay, so with that, that'll be that'll be it. So thank you all for attending this very short informational meeting. And if you officers can stay behind, I'd greatly appreciate it.
You should talk about the judges just to make
Oh
sure.
yeah, oh yeah. Sorry. For judging, thank you, Ivani.
It's okay. Yeah.
For judging, so far we have, uh, as the judges put down, we have Michael provided by Samuel and Raymond provided by Dylan, and we have Priya provided by Annika. Um, and I would just like to ask if those people who I've just listed are available for both days, and if they're not available to judge both days, please let me know as soon as possible, and base their judging availability on the debate schedule that Avani linked in the chat. If they're not available both days, it's not an issue. Just please let me know as soon as possible, preferably by like tomorrow evening, so I can figure out what the best course of action is. So please let me know as soon as possible. Anything else? Should we get more familiar with certain rules or stuff before the tournament? I think that reviewing the rules on their invite page, if they have any specific rules, I haven't looked through if they have any specific rules for their tournament, but check out the invite page on Tabroom, and I would just say familiarize yourself with what the tournament has posted, because those can be important things, like for instance the schedule, and the schedule probably being the most important. But if they have rules that are added on top of regular debate rules, I would say definitely take those into account and read those and familiarize yourself with them. But if not, then I wouldn't say that you have to go and review the rules of parliamentary debate. But if you have any questions about them, please reach out to any of us officers or Mr. Kistler, because we can clarify for you. And so, Mr. Kistler, I've covered judge requirements, how the tournament's going to be operated, but do you think there's anything else that we should mention?
Of the tournament?
Yeah, about the tournament.
I think it's going to be pretty similar to what it was last time, although we have to remember that this is taking place in the Oregon circuit. And so there might be a few slight differences, but I don't know exactly what they will. Like, for example, the name of the divisions, they're, instead of calling them novice, they call them juniors. So, I mean, if I can find anything in specific, I'll let us know. But if there's some weird just differences in terminology, just be prepared for that and ask like, oh, I'm sorry, what does that term mean? We call it something different in California. That's pretty much it.
Oh yeah, please remember that this is an Oregon tournament, so you may not see a lot of teams that you're familiar with in California. I don't know how many other teams that are from the Bay Area and California in general are going to this tournament. So, don't be intimidated by our West Coast friends of the North.
How many teams will be there is a question.
How many teams will be there is a question. Let me check for that right now. Just one sec. Open Parley.
There will be 6 teams, so 4 novice or junior Parley, and then 2 open.
Oh yeah, sorry. So teams that are being sent from Valley, that'll be 6. But was the question in regards to like the total amount of teams that are going to be there? Because if so. Mr. Kitzler, do you know what the cap was for the teams?
I'm looking at it right now. So an open Parley, there's 54 teams total. You can see it here, 54 entries. And then what do they call it? Junior Parley. There's 25. But look, I mean, we got some Berkeley High School, some Irvington, some El Cerrito. So we actually might see a fair number of familiar faces. I think because this tournament has, it was qualified for TOC points. So that's like California, or a lot of it's California based. You're going to see Berkeley, Archbishop Mitty, Irvington, Los Altos. So kind of a good mix of people.
Okay, great. And I'm actually glad that there's going to be some more California teams, because then you guys can familiarize yourself with them, and so you could, if you see them in the future, you know who they are. With that, are there any other questions? What was Josh's question?
Yeah, I think we need to make sure that each team knows what side they're debating on, because I think there was some confusion last time about where to find if they're the AF side or Gov or Op side. So if we could clarify that part.
Yeah, so really quick, some tournaments will use Gov and Op, and others will use AF and Neg. AF means affirmation, Neg means negation. So affirmation is for the resolution, negation is against. And Gov means government, Op means opposition. So opposition would be against the resolution and government would be for the resolution. And then in regards to Josh's question about should we be preparing for Oregon-focused topics, I think that when you go to California tournaments, you'll sometimes see things that say the California government should do this. So I would expect that similar things are like that for different states. So you might get a resolution that says, you know, the Oregon legislation should do X, Y, Z. And I don't think it'll be that big of a distinction from, you know, California. Like, I'm sure that it won't be that different from doing a California legislation topic, but I would say that, you know, remember that you're doing an Oregon tournament and not a California tournament. And Jeremy says, is there a main topic surrounding this debate tournament? From what I presume, there is not a main topic.
Yeah, let me speak that just a second. For a few years, it's been common for tournaments to kind of give us topic areas, meaning that we can sort of like prepare for certain policy areas. This one, but this year I haven't seen any of them do that. So I don't know whether that's it. Basically, every tournament gets to set their own rules, and this one I don't think does. Yeah, on the invite PDF, topics are written by Oregon Forensic. So Oregon is the name of the university, right? University of Oregon is in Eugene. That's like the University of Oregon Ducks, you know, throw the O. In the same way that that Berkeley, technically you can call them California, all right? Because it is the flagship university for California. So that's all it means. Oregon Forensics is the Oregon Ducks Eugene debate, their college debate team. So it just means they're writing their own topics. Now, another way that you can sometimes get at it is at a tournament like this, that has multiple different events, including LD and public forum, which is not the case of all tournaments. This one has like a really broad field in terms of events. Sometimes Parley will get kind of sneaky and like steal one of the topics from the Parley from the public forum or LD. So here's what they are for the tournament. Public forum is going to be debating the benefits of the United States Space Force outweighing the harms. And LD is going to be United States ought to guarantee universal childcare. So no guarantees necessarily, but if you're thinking about some random places to put your research in the next couple of days, maybe Space Force and universal childcare, maybe. I've seen it happen a couple times.
Yeah. And then also, sorry, Avani was also mentioning where you'll find, like if you're affirmation, negation, gov, or op. I would say that is typically like on the NSDA campus like tournament page, and I will send out a video showing how to operate it so that and showing like how it looks when you're in a tournament. And again, if there's any confusion, you know, watch the video again or reach out to us so we can help you navigate it properly. But it should be pretty clear, like when they give you your assignment during a round, if you are affirmation or negation. You know, I would say that it should be pretty clear, and it will appear on the NSDA campus. Are there any other questions?
If you're confused though, you can pop into the squad room and I should be there. And you can just say, hey, I don't understand what this ballot means. And then I'll try to help sort it out for you. But once you do it once or twice, you should get the hang of it. It's not that hard.
Yeah, I would agree. And actually, I'm going to pull up the video and send it to you all as soon as possible. Here's a link in the chat to the video, and then I'll also send it in the chat. Are there any other questions?
Mohan, I have a topic I can talk about if you want.
Sure.
Policy topic, but I don't know what you have planned for the meeting.
I didn't really have anything planned. I kind of just wanted it to be an informational meeting, but if you would like to talk, sure.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about Section 230, which has to do with basically the internet and free speech and stuff like that. And it's becoming somewhat of a discussion. It's one of those interesting topics in which there's actually a fair amount of good faith diversity of opinion about it. And so I think it might show up. And being from Silicon Valley, we should definitely like know about it. So it basically has to do with like free speech and internet law. All right. How long do you want me to talk?
However long.
Okay.
I said that this meeting wouldn't be too long, but I'm, if people have time constraints, then I'm recording it. So,
Okay.
We'll send out this video too.
All right. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. So it starts with a story. In the 70s, there was a bookshop owner in one of the sort of in the naughtier parts of Los Angeles. And a cop comes in, a vice cop comes in and finds a dirty book on the shelf. And he arrests the guy and charges him with distribution of basically like profanity and like, stuff that's against the law, like naughty stuff. So he goes to court and he basically says, I'm a bookshop owner. I sell thousands of books. I can't be expected to read every single one of them to test for it. Therefore, it's not my fault that there happened to be somebody else's book that they wrote that breaks the law that happens to be in my inventory. Goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court affirms him and says, you're right. And what they said was, if we expect every bookstore owner to know and defend and be liable for every single word which is printed in every book in their bookshop, then what that's going to do is basically shut down bookstores, because like they will be so open to litigation and to being sued. It'll basically destroy the book industry, and that has some free speech implications, right? The incentive is that you will not speak or you will not publish or distribute information, ideas, speech, if you think that you're going to be liable for every word. So that's in the 70s. In the 90s, the internet was kind of invented, but the internet today looks very different than it did back then. I remember this when we were, unplugging the phone from the wall and plugging in a dial-up cord and then going on AOL, and it would take about 3 or 4 minutes to like dial up to get into it. When the internet was at its burgeoning stages, there were two different paradigms that people thought about the internet. The first one was the one that we kind of see today, which is like this multilateral, democratized version of the internet in which people spoke to each other, right? In which businesses would have a way to communicate to users, and users would have a way to communicate to businesses, and users would have a way to communicate to users. So basically just like a level playing field. Another way of putting that would be a bulletin board, right? That the internet is a bulletin board where anyone can post up any information to each other. But the other paradigm that was being sold was the concept of basically a newspaper, that companies would provide these more vertical experiences in which they would provide content to the user directly that they were responsible for, that they produced and provided, and the user would basically buy it like a service, like you'd buy a magazine or a newspaper or something like that. And so AOL, America Online, was that second type. AOL for many years was providing the content, and you were kind of like within this sort of fence where you could only interact with AOL content on the AOL servers. What ended up happening in the 90s was, of course, users were posting up content that were found to be objectionable, and these two companies were taken to court. The first one moderated all of their information, like an AOL, and the second one moderated none of their information. And ironically speaking, the one that moderated none of their information, the one that was like the open and free one, had the case dismissed because the judge says, we can't hold you, the website, liable for all the information that was published because you don't moderate it. Therefore, you didn't have any ability to like shut down the naughty stuff, right? Because we don't expect you to look over everything. It's not part of your business model. It's not your fault that some bad stuff was posted. Ironically speaking, the other website who moderated their information much more closely was held liable for it because you tried to moderate it, you tried to like focus on it, and because you missed it, that's your fault and we're going to sue you. And so it created this weird perverse incentive where any kind of website would actually be in more trouble the more they tried to moderate, because by the act of moderating it, by the act of regulating the content on their website, they implied that they themselves were trying to be liable for it. So this creates all kinds of perverse incentives where like regulation of violent material, regulation of sexually explicit material, or even like terrorist stuff or sex trafficking suddenly becomes disincentivized. And so in the early 2000s, there was this bill passed called Section 230. Section 230, which is what I'm talking about right now. This lecture is about Section 230. I'm not sure what it's a section of, but it's a specific tiny little paragraph within a larger bill regulating telecommunications or the internet. And Section 230 is only 26 words. And in it, it basically says that the website that hosts the content cannot be held liable for the content it hosts. Another way of putting it is that the law must distinguish between the producer of content online and the hoster of content online. You see the difference? The person that made it versus the person that has the website on which it was posted and distributed. And the reason for this is because at the time they thought there is a difference online. There's a difference on this new internet thing between a newspaper and a newsstand. Anything which is in a newspaper, you can reasonably assume that was created by the newspaper company. They put their stamp on it, says, we agree with this, we produce it, we put it out there, thus they can be held liable. Versus if you're a newsstand, meaning you're just like you're selling newspapers on a street corner, you're not reasonably expected to have read everything on your newsstands, therefore you can't be. So what Section 230 basically does is creates the internet. Without Section 230, the internet as we know it does not exist. Because if it didn't, right, if every website was liable for everything that was ever posted, then user produced content would essentially not exist. It would be outlawed or it would be against most rules for us to post anything on the internet, because Facebook is not going to take the chance that if I post something insulting on my Facebook, or Yelp, if I post a negative review of my local restaurant, they're not going to take the chance that they, the corporation, could get sued for me leaving a negative review on the local restaurant, because that local restaurant could sue them for defamation, for damaging their business, for creating some kind of problem with their profit margins. And so without Section 230, the internet would be very vertical. It would all be about companies producing their own content and sending it to us, and we would just absorb it passively and have no ability to communicate back to them or to communicate with each other. So that's pretty remarkable, right? That without this provision, with this provision, it makes the internet free, democratized, and makes everybody able to post anything on anyone's website without fear that the company themselves are going to get sued for the content of that, for that content. So it sounds pretty great, but then there starts to be some problems, and it starts happening about 2 or 3 years ago, where on the conservative side, specifically Ted Cruz introduces this when he calls Mark Zuckerberg to the Congress, and he says, Mark Zuckerberg, do you think of the platform as being a neutral platform for people to post their views, or do you think of the website as being like a politically active? Basically, are you just hosting this neutral position, or are you yourself taking part in the discussion? And of course, Mark Zuckerberg says, well, no, we're a neutral platform. And Ted Cruz says, well, then how come all the conservative voices on your platform keep getting drowned out, keep getting struck, keep getting flagged, et cetera, and starts accusing social media, specifically Facebook and Twitter, of having this anti-conservative bias. Now, this is patently false. It's ridiculous. If you look at the data on a daily basis, the top 10 posts on Facebook every day, usually 8 out of 10 of them are from prominent conservative voices, but it becomes this narrative, right? And a lot of conservatives, Donald Trump in particular, start calling for the repeal of Section 230. Because they think that Section 230 provides a shield, a liability shield that's too strong, and that it shields these social media companies or any content companies from any kind of criticism. Basically, they think that Facebook has this political activist position that they cannot be held accountable for, that they cannot be sued for. And so they want to remove Section 230 such that the social media companies can basically be sued. It's based upon a faulty premise, but what makes it even more interesting is that a lot of people on the other side of the aisle, your Elizabeth Warrens, et cetera, also have a lot of criticism for Section 230, because what they say is someone who posts incitement to violence, someone that posts sex trafficking, someone that posts terrorist content or harassment online, or even selling guns online, is also protected by this liability shield. I mean, gun companies that sell guns online actually use Section 230 as a way to prevent themselves from being sued, right? Like if there's like a gun exchange company in which you can sell your gun to another user or something like that, then that gun is used in a school shooting, is used in a murder. We can't sue the website which allowed for that gun exchange, because they'll say, well, we're not responsible for the content which is posted on our website. You see? So people on the left don't like the fact that it allows for hate speech, incitement to violence, violent activity, gun, etc. Without, basically it makes the media companies or the internet completely immune to any kind of criticism or litigation, which allows them to like not regulate. And so it's this really interesting discussion. Right, we're on both sides. The conservative perception is that social media is biased against conservatives, and so Section 230 should be stricken so that they can be sued over it. And the left basically says, in fact, there's too much hate speech and there's too much conservative voices and too much violence, and therefore they can't be sued for it. But the real problem here, of course, is that, well, okay, well, what is the alternative? Imagine a world in which any company, Yahoo or Google or Facebook or Twitter, anything else, is now responsible for all the content posted on their website, all of it, every part of it. They would immediately open themselves up to litigation after litigation after litigation after litigation. And not just the big boys, but imagine that you're a small startup company, right? Trying to, you're Uber or you're Yelp or, something new, right? Where you don't have lawyers on lawyers on lawyers to protect you. If you don't have the protection of Section 230, if you know that if any user starts interacting with your site and posts something that could be considered illegal or threatening or whatever, damaging in any way, that you could get sued for it, you're much less likely to want to start that website because you're going to get sued out of existence. And so there's some problems with abolishing Section 230 because there's some free speech implications. If we abolish the public forum that lets people talk to each other, there's less free speech. And there's definitely business implications because it doesn't allow for innovation if you're constantly afraid of being sued for starting a new company. But on the other hand, maybe giving unqualified immunity to social media companies that no matter what's posted on their website, whether it be like a video of a massacre or an incitement to violence, that they can't be sued over it, is also problematic. So anyway, that's kind of what I want to talk about. Section 230 is really fascinating because there's actually three sides to it, which is that there's a conservative objection to it, there is a progressive objection to it, and then there's just like a neutral, like, well, what about free speech type of objection? So anyway, that's Section 230. I thought I'd bring it up because I think it's important not only for like electoral politics, but also for free speech, as well as, Silicon Valley in which we live. So what are your questions or clarifications?
Has it been shown that something like this can prevent innovation because of the fear of being litigated against?
I mean, yeah, yeah. Pre-section, well, it's more one of those things that it's just sort of reasonable to assume. In general, if you are thinking about starting a business, but by starting that business, you take on an incredible amount of liability and you don't have the resources to deal with that liability, it just stands to reason that it'll have a chilling effect on that and it's going to make you less likely to start the business, right? For example, I might consider starting a business doing SAT tutoring, right? Because I'm thinking, well, what's the worst that can happen? It doesn't succeed and I lose the whatever. But I'm way less likely to start a business selling alligators because selling alligators is freaking dangerous. And if it kills somebody or hurts somebody, suddenly I'm in court, right? So that's the idea, is the higher level of danger or liability I carry, the less likely I am to want to start a new company or to really innovate in any particular way. And, consider the fact that now Facebook and Twitter, whatever, they're the big boys. They might be able to handle all this litigation because they have nearly infinite funds. So in comparison with the level of like resources that they can leverage on top of everything else, it basically makes it impossible for smaller, innovative startups to even compete. So yeah, go ahead.
Is there some sort of like middle ground between like keeping Section 230 as the way it is and like repealing it?
Yes.
Like some alternative, yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of the middle ground, is what's being proposed in Congress right now is not so much repealing Section 230 as it is amending it and creating some carve-outs. So the specific carve-outs that they would provide is Section 230 still protects platforms from user-generated speech online. However, if that user-generated speech has the following, or is in the following circumstances, it is no longer, it's basically exempt from these protections. So the proposed examples would be online harassment. let's say that your ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend, or whatever, you break up with them, and then online they keep posting on Twitter, negative, horrible things about you, defamation, ruining your character, etc. You lose your job over it. The carve-out would say, okay, at that point, you can sue Twitter for refusing to remove this content. Or, for example, Trump posting something online that incites his followers to violence. It would say that under this incitement clause, you can sue Twitter if they refuse to take it down or something. Two more things that they're really worried about, like I said, gun trafficking. There'd be a specific carve out for the idea that gun manufacturers and gun exchange websites don't qualify under Section 230. And the final one has to do with, so it said harassment, incitement to violence, guns, and oh man, this is a big one. So there was this kerfuffle, I think it was like 4 years ago. You guys remember the problem of Myanmar and the Rohingya genocide that took place there a few years ago? Okay. What's really sad about this is that apparently the Rohingya genocide was organized and incited on Facebook, on the Myanmar version of Facebook. And there were all kinds of groups which are put together that like spread all of these conspiracy theories and lies about the Rohingya, being bad or something like that. And then people organized the genocide on Facebook. And Facebook didn't do anything about it. They didn't take down any of the content. They didn't moderate it. It was just up there like crazy. And then this incredible violence occurred and hundreds of thousands of people died or were expelled from their country. And so Facebook gets sued for this because they're like, this is incredibly negligent. Why didn't you take this stuff off their site? And their response was, well, we only had one person on the Myanmar account. Basically, in this massive company, only one person spoke the language and was assigned to this particular region of the country. And there's no way that this one person could moderate the millions of posts that were online. Thus, they didn't really pay attention to it and all this negative stuff happened. But they also pointed to Section 230. Said, well, we would like to take it down. If we had known, we would have taken it down. But because we didn't know, and because we're not responsible for this genocidal content being posted up, on Burmese Facebook, it's not our fault and we can't be sued. So that would be the fourth carve out, is specifically when it comes to, it's called something like alien tort liability, which sounds really funny, but basically it means you're responsible for stuff posted by non-US citizens, even if you yourself are a US company. So that would be the other carve out that they're talking about. To me, that seems pretty reasonable. You keep the main liability protections in place to help like free speech occur and to keep the internet as free and democratized as possible. But you like try to curb some of the worst excesses of this like unqualified liability shield. Yeah, I think that would be an example where if the AF were given like, we should abolish Section 230 or something, we should repeal Section 230. I think the NAG would be pretty within their rights to come back with a CP that says we shouldn't abolish it, but we should, moderate it or have some carve outs for these specific issues. If you're the AF, I think that you should say we should abolish it and replace it with something that has these carve outs, but also has the protections. We'll call it Section 230A or something like that. Other questions? Okay, I think that's the shortest lecture I've ever given. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
He's like,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.